Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I want to talk to you about editing again. We talked about this last week in my video on Flex Time, which is an extremely powerful tool for some forms of editing on some sources, but it doesn't work on every source, not quite as well as it should at least. And that's because it's actually stretching or compressing the audio. So for some sources that's going to sound fine, that can still sound natural. But for other more complicated sources, it tends to sound a little bit weird. So that's when I use this other form of editing called destructive editing. Kind of cool, kind of ridiculous name, right? This editing approach is essentially chopping and sliding your audio to be exactly where it should be, to line up with the timing of the song, with a specific part, or just to be where you want it to be exactly. This is a really important, often missed step in the recording process, and it's something that all professional engineers do, at least to some extent. Now, before we jump into it, I do want to give you something, because while editing may be the missing step in your music, you still have to mix your music for it to sound as good as possible. So I've put together something to help you with that. I've put together a completely free 6-step checklist that just walks through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how you can do them inside GarageBand completely free. So be sure to grab that from the link in the description below. But let's go ahead and jump into today's video. Alright, so in this video, we're going to edit a guitar part. Now this guitar part is one main lead solo line, and then there's a left double and a right double to the solo line. Each has a slightly different performance and a slightly different tone. So we just want to make sure that they're really locked in together so that they're supporting the lead line. We're not trying to make it robotic. We're not trying to take any character or life out of it. But we do want to make sure that it's really serving the song and serving the part to the best of our ability. Now, we're demonstrating this on a guitar, but you could do this with a vocal, you could do this with drums, you could do this with acoustic guitar, but with whatever it is you're working on, you want to continuously check and make sure that it's sounding better and that you're not actually adding any distractions in the ways of pops or clicks that might be pulling the listener's attention. Remember that editing is at its core just removing any distractions for the listener so they can just enjoy the mix. When things are just a little bit off, they may not be able to point to exactly what it is that's bugging them, but they're just going to be a little bit distracted by it. If you get rid of any of those distractions, then they can just enjoy the song and enjoy the mix. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what we're all looking for with the music that we make. So let's go ahead and listen to this guitar example. We'll go ahead and play it all the way through. And listen for moments where it seems like something's just a little bit off and see if you can identify those. With you. Pretty great solo, right? Pretty good tone, really good performance. I don't think anyone would tell me any of those performances are not good. They're all largely in time with this song, but because this is one lead part and 2 doubles that are supposed to be augmenting it, it's really important that those are only supporting it and never distracting from it. Now, there's a couple little things that jump out at me, but the main area that I'm really hearing there being variation is in these really staccato parts that are right on the beat. I can hear a fair amount of variation between those parts. Not uncommon when you do things that are really precisely rhythmic, especially actually when it's slower. It's easy for there to be a little bit of more variation to it. And so it's important that we get those really locked in with each other and get it to where it's supporting the lead line. So if we listen to this kind of just from the beginning, I'll kind of zoom in on what we're talking about. So listening to this here. So in particular, right in here in the second passing of it, I start to notice a little more variation between the parts. Let's listen in solo here. Left ear's a little ahead. And then it falls a little bit behind, and then it's a little ahead again. Now, it's important when you're doing this that you edit to whatever you want it to be in time with. Now, a lot of times that's going to be our GarageBand drums, because our GarageBand drummer is always going to be in time. So in this case, we're going to focus first on getting the lead track in just a little bit better time with the drums. Now we're not going to try to make this perfect and take out any sort of variation or character to it. We're going to get a little bit closer, because if you do look, we'll go ahead and mute these other two. This is falling a little bit behind the beat. If we look at each of these points being, you know, the first beat, this is the second beat, third beat, fourth beat. Each of these parts is just a little bit behind where it should be in terms of being right in line with the drums. Listen to this without the other two guitars in for a second here. Now, it's not majorly behind the beat, but it is just a little bit. And again, we're trying to reduce any sort of distractions, get this part exactly how we want it to be, how we intended to record it, exactly what the part should be. So we're going to start, before we start aligning these other parts, we're going to start by getting this part more in time, and then we'll use it kind of as a guide track for other parts. So we're just going to hit Command T to make a cut here. And then before we actually start moving this, we want to figure out where the end of our cut is. So go until you either start to be more on beat or off beat in the other direction, as in ahead of the beat. So here everything's a little bit behind the beat. We see we want that to be lined up closer to the beat. We want that to be lined up closer to the beat. So what we want to do is find where he's kind of in time with the beat. It looks to me like this beat right here is likely where he starts to really get back on the beat. So we're now just going to take this and we're going to shift it forward just a little bit closer to where it should be to be on time with the beat there. Let's listen to this now. As a whole, it's pretty good, but he does start to get a little ahead of the beat. You can see he's right on the beat here. So we are going to cut here, and we're going to find when he starts to get a little bit too ahead of the beat. These are all still fine. Again, it's fine to be a little bit ahead of the beat, but once you start to be noticeably ahead of the beat, then that's a problem as well. So we'll pull this back, we trim right here, and just slide this just a little bit. And now, if we play this through, now it's really locked into the beat. It's never really ahead or behind. And we can use this as a guide track and edit to this so that all the parts that are supporting this part are now specifically supporting this part, as opposed to just being lined up perfectly to the click or to the grid, if you will, to the drums, however you want to think about it. Our focus now shifts from being lining up to the grid and more lining up to whatever this part is doing. So that's the way I like to think of editing to start. So we're going to unmute this second one, and let's go back to the start of this section here and look visually first and notice how we can see at times it's pretty far ahead, and then as it continues on it gets to be a little bit more ahead. It gets kind of in time with the other one at some points, and then it starts to get a little bit behind. So now, you know, our main guitar is hitting pretty much right on that beat, and this one's hitting pretty far off of that beat. So what we want to do is cut before it starts to get behind, and we're going to go back to the beginning of this, and we want to make a small shift at the beginning here, because we can see this one's pretty far ahead, but this one is actually pretty close to being perfectly in with the other one. So again, we're not making it perfect, we're just getting it close so that it's a little bit tighter. No distractions, right? Okay, let's listen to these two now here. He starts to get a little bit more ahead pretty quickly, so now he's starting to get ahead again, so we'll cut here. Shift this just a little bit. And then he's behind here. So we're going to shift. Before we shift this, again, you want to go to the end and figure out where does he start to get back on again. And in this case, it looks like he's off all the way through here. For the sake of just keeping it in sections, we'll cut at this point. And let's look at where we can drop this one to be more in time. So this one here. Now this one, the first hit is a little ahead, the second hit is a little behind. Let's chop in between and see if we can get them a little bit closer together. So we'll chop there, bring this in just a little bit, chop back here. Bring this back just a hair. Now we're being very, very subtle here. And then let's just shift this last one back just a hair. Again, so that it's in line with the lead guitar. So then he starts to fall a little bit behind again here. We won't go all the way into it. We'll focus just on the section that we're doing right now. So sometimes I work in parts and I'll just go through this whole solo and I'll go through the entire track and make sure that the lead and one track is all the way edited, and then I'll move on to the next track and edit. Sometimes I'll work in sections and I'll get all 3 or 4 or 5, however many parts need to be edited, all the way edited across each individual section before I move on to the next section. But let's go back now and bring in this third guitar and listen to how this one's playing in with these other guitars here. I do want to go ahead and pull this here so that there's no edits that are noticeable. And let's listen in solo before we actually move on and see, do we hear any pops in either of these first 2 guitars? I do a little bit in that edit. Listen to the left ear right there. You hear a little bit of a pop. Let's see if we can get it. And if not, sometimes you just have to let it be and let go of the edit and let it be just a little bit off. But I think that fixed it. So let's listen and see if we still hear a pop there. I don't. Sounded good. Okay, now let's go back out of solo, listen in the context of the drum. Let's listen to focusing on this right guitar part now. Overall, this one is really pretty in time. It looks like at a couple points it's a little bit behind, so let's shift those just a little bit closer. You can listen in solo here. You can hear that it's just a little bit behind there. And he really catches up pretty well by this point here. So let's go ahead and just cut up till there. And we'll just make a small edit right here and bring that just a little bit closer. We're just going to bring it a little bit closer to where the other guitars are. I'm going to double check these. Those all sound good to me. So let's listen in solo one more time. Just listen for pops and clicks. I don't hear anything in that. So now listen to this in the context with the drums and notice how in time this is and how well they support each other here. Pretty awesome, right? So that's just some subtle editing. That's just getting things a little bit more in time with each other. We're not going overboard, but we are getting it nice and in time with each other and making sure that everything plays in sync with whatever the main rhythm of the song is. In this case, it's the GarageBand drums, so we want to be perfectly in time with that. And then we're also making sure that everything is in sync with each other so that it's supporting it the way that it should. Now, 3 tips before we finish. First tip, you have to get the best performance that you're capable of. That's baseline. You still have to get your best take. That is always going to get you the best final product. So still put a lot of time and energy into the recording phase. Don't just think, oh, I'll just fix it with editing. Try to get it as perfect as you possibly can, and then just use a little bit of subtle editing to get it just a little bit tighter. It can't make a bad performance sound good, but it can make a good performance sound great and perfectly in time with exactly where it should be. So editing is super powerful, but it's not going to fix a bad performance. Number 2 is that while destructive editing is often my go-to, it's my favorite approach for a lot of things, flex time is still a really powerful tool, and sometimes you can use a combination in ways to get parts exactly where they should be when one or the other might not be exactly right. So for example, in the fully edited version of this solo, if we go up here, let's just look at this one here, look at the editor window. In addition to a little bit of the editing that I've done, I also use just a little bit of flex time. So just an occasional little marker to shift it in a way that I couldn't quite do with the destructive editing. I wouldn't want it to have done the whole solo with flex time, because I often find that flex time adds a little bit of artifacts, especially on guitar tones. I don't know why. But if I use a combination and I'm just doing small, subtle edits, then I often can find that it will work pretty well. And third, editing is important. It might be the missing step in your music, but you still have to mix it. So go grab my free 6-step checklist to a pro mix in GarageBand from the link in the description below. It's really going to help you out. It's helped out hundreds, if not thousands of people create really, really great sounding music inside GarageBand. And I use that exact 6-step process on this song that we've been listening to today. So be sure to grab that from the link in the description below. Before we go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever used editing in this way? Have you ever used destructive editing? Let me know in the comments below. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.